Hi folks, and welcome to this 9th daily critique. We're now on our second week of UK lockdown due to the coronavirus. I'm sure many of you are in the same situation, so I'm hoping that these videos have provided a welcome distraction, and no doubt they will continue to do so for some weeks yet, because I think we're in here for the long run. I'm pleased to say Fotospeed have come on board, so they will be offering a free print, an A3 print of your choice. It doesn't have to be an image that I've actually critiqued here, to the person who effectively produced the most interesting video through their images, and in this case that's Struan Robertson, who gave me those amazing photos of Yosemite last week. So I'll be picking a winner each week, and then just get in touch with me and I'll tell you how to get that print sorted with Fotospeed. So that's great news. I've also got another 10 photographers lined up and ready to go. But if you do want to take part yourself, then just have a look at that video that I posted a few days ago telling you how to submit your images. Today we're going through 5 photos by Donnie Fulks, and this video is going to be about detail issues, about noise and about sharpening, and also about how you might be introducing artifacts into your images if you're not careful. So let's get going. So these are the 5 images that Donnie sent over, each one of them pretty beautiful, I have to say. Some really lovely characteristics to all these images, particularly looking at them like this. Really spectacular shots. This is a bit of a good news, bad news critique, because there's a lot that's really wonderful about these shots. There's also quite a lot to work on, in my opinion, mostly on the detail end, which is interesting in itself, because Donnie really does care about the detail side of things, as I can tell from some of the comments he sent me to accompany his images. But firstly, I'm going to have a look in Photoshop and just discuss the compositions, which I think are very effective. So I'll get my red brush out here and draw on that layer. There we go. So we've got a centrally placed sun here, a nice warm inviting white balance, and these fantastic lines all focusing in on the sun. A great sense of perspective, some lovely textures, and really a classic example of these, I assume, American desert landscapes. So really like that one. And then we have a lovely waterfall shot here with this obvious plunge pool focal point, and then some really stunning colour along the edge of the stream here, autumnal colours coming through, and a really dramatic feel to the image thanks to this sky here. And here we've got what appears to be the sun coming through the cloud here, creating a bit of shadow on the bush. A really nice composition again, a little bit left heavy maybe. Both your focal points are on the left. It would be nice to have maybe the tree more central potentially. I think that might work slightly better from a balance standpoint, but nevertheless a dramatic image, bags of atmosphere, and nice simple focal points too. And then this is Oxen, I believe, on Senya. I've been here a couple of times myself. Ironically, when I've been going up mountains, I've had fairly boring light, and then whenever I've come to this spot, I've had amazing light. So I've got a couple of nice photos from here myself, and this is a great example of this ridge in the winter. Very aggressive, steep-faced ridge here, and nicely composed and well timed with this wave breaking across the rocks, and some really nice textures here in the foreground. And then finally we have this rather nice cascade, technically brilliant, and beautiful colors and details. Compositionally, a nice degree of asymmetry, nothing fancy in terms of the structure, but nicely balanced all the same. So very well executed on that end. I've just realized I'm showing you my edit there, but that's Donnie's, so very similar indeed. And so I thought I'd start with this one and then work back to where I started, discussing some more of the detail issues. Firstly, let's just compare my edit to Donnie's here. You can just see he's got a little bit of magenta here in the water that I would try to take out. He's also using a slightly different exposure. He didn't actually provide me with the raw that gave this water texture. It's personal taste, but actually I do prefer the longer exposure myself. And then Donnie's done some interesting sharpening techniques here. So he's really got a very detailed looking file here. You can see my edit is slightly different. And the one thing I would say is that perhaps Donnie's looks just slightly over sharpened. And maybe there's a bit of artifacting going on with some of these twigs. I'm just trying to spot one here. But some of them look slightly strange. So were you to print this really large, see there's a tiny line that's sort of doubled up running through there. It just looks slightly digital to me. So I'd almost rather have a little bit more softness because I think that would actually print better and look more natural at a large scale. But I guess that's down to personal opinion. I know Donnie's done some workshops with some very well-known American photographers who are known for their print work. So I will have to bow to their authority in that respect. But to my personal taste, I'd probably ease back on the sharpening a little bit. But otherwise, a really, really beautiful image. And you can see Donnie's removed this highlight up in the top corner here, which is the only distraction. And I would have done exactly the same. Yeah, really nicely balanced image. Right, now onto this one. I will show you my edit quickly. I've gone for a colder white balance generally, and I've hung on to more of the highlights in the clouds here. You can see the contrast here has created an unusual sort of grey to blue to white colour transition. I find this area in the clouds a little bit distracting, I have to say. So this is actually just straight from the raw. There's no cloning done here, and you can see there's actually some nice detail in that cloud that's somehow been lost in that more contrasty edit there. I've kept some of the bluer feel in. I think that the natural blue tone between the ridge and the sky and the water is actually really nice. It ties the image together nicely, whereas I think this edit here with the mixture of blacks and blues, it doesn't feel as coherent to me. Yeah, I personally prefer it like this, but again, personal taste. And then lastly, this image was soft. I don't know if that was because of the lens or because it was out of focus, but it did require more than the usual sharpening, and that introduces a small amount of noise that you can see here, although I've done a tiny bit of noise reduction. And I thought I'd just compare that to Donnie's edit, because I've actually used very simple sharpening methods here in Lightroom, and then a little bit more in Photoshop, and I think the detail is better resolved in my edit. And I think a big part of that is that there appears to have been a lot of noise reduction on this. It's got a sort of mushy feel to it, like there's a kind of blur, which is yeah, a hallmark of noise reduction quite often. So I would suggest going back to basics with this one, Donnie, in terms of your edit. I think you'll get a cleaner result personally. Even if you do prefer your own edit for the colours, I would certainly revisit the sharpening on this one, because I think you can get a bit more from the file. Okay, then on to this one. This is a very well executed edit with a couple of exceptions. There's a bit of colour banding coming through the sky here. You can see it a bit more clearly if you introduce a curve here. So you can see there's this like greeny yellow line following through here in this area, and again here, and you can see that in the original. So that's an impact of the color work that's been done, I believe, because this is actually what the original looks like. So this apparent sunlight here has been created digitally. I think there's even a shadow's been painted in down here, and I have to say it's quite effective. I didn't immediately recognize that this was you know, not the reality of the scene. And in that sense, it's quite an impressive edit. It's not the kind of thing that I would do myself. I've had too many arguments with too many photographers about this sort of stuff, but I can't deny that it's effective, especially on the aesthetic side. I just watch for those artifacts. So then let's go with this one first. And compositionally, this is great, but even at this size, I can see an issue with the sky. It looks very smooth, very blurred, and if we zoom in here, then you can see that is even more apparent. So you can see from Donnie's file naming here, he's planning on possibly printing this 20 by 30 inches, and at that size you would really see a big problem in the print, because this sky here is very, very smooth and waxy. It's lacking its natural noise and details. So here's an edit that I did that, you know, sort of approximates what Donnie did. Donnie's added a bit more color, but there's some nice detail here in these clouds that's been lost, and the sun looks rather strange, I have to say. So again, I understand the ideas around locally changing your noise reduction. So in smoother areas, you might want to apply more noise reduction. I don't do that myself. I think it's overkill in most cases. The amount of noise you have in this image is relatively subtle and would be lost in the print, whereas the noise reduction that you've done unfortunately wouldn't be lost in the print, and it would just look rather strange on the wall, I'm afraid to say. So a really beautiful image, but just let down by that noise reduction there in the sky. And then finally onto this rather stunning waterfall. I've actually tried to recreate this edit to a large extent. One of the first things you might notice is that a different sky has been dropped in here. The original sky obviously was a bit flat, maybe for Donnie's liking in terms of the amount of detail that it provides, but turning these layers on and off does reveal that the sky replacement could have been done slightly tidier. So if I bring in a curves adjustment here, then you can start to see that cloud showing through there. So it's sort of a cloud that's hung over from the previous sky, but you've got a fringing effect around the edge of it here. So that's undesirable, and I would, if you want to replace the sky, just be careful that you don't have that problem up there. That might have been caused by using a blend if or something on the sky. So let's turn that off. The other thing is a fair amount of work has gone into this image. So there's the sky replacement, there's the color work and the sharpening. This again has had an unusual form of sharpening that I don't actually recognize myself, but no doubt it's from one of these master printmakers in America, the technique. I'm not exactly sure. But I think if you're starting to apply these advanced techniques, it's even more important that you recognize some of the more fundamental aspects, the issues both surrounding using those techniques and also with the image initially. I mean, for a start, if you drop in the sky and introduce those artifacts, that's not ideal. But there's also, I guess, water or a mark on the lens. You can see this sort of haziness to this area here. And it's also all over this left-hand side of the image. So you're lacking blacks in this area, and actually there's a bit of haze in there. So one thing I did in my edit was to set black points in those areas and just bring back that contrast so that you don't have that wishy-washy look around the edges of your images there that comes from some sort of flare. So do watch out for that sort of thing. Another thing that I noticed, I guess, with the sharpening and noise reduction is that some details are being lost. So if you're concerned about printing to a large size, it isn't that important to eliminate all noise, and particularly not at the expense of details. So if you just look in the rock textures here, maybe in this area, then you'll see some of that detail just starts to disappear, and you start to lose color resolution too. I guess due to the noise reduction. In fact, it's really apparent in this this section of rock just here. And if I turn that visibility on and off, you can see that red detail just completely disappears. So the noise reduction techniques are really harming the color fidelity and the detail fidelity here. And then if we look at this area of brush at the back, similarly, you lose all of these sort of greens and grays to a rather amorphous yellow color. And then especially in this area, I think we've blown the red channel, I checked, and so some of the detail has gone there. You can see just how much detail there is in my edit compared to this slightly more aggressive edit. So, and then again, the texture just looks a bit plasticky. So it's really important if you're using these complex techniques to understand exactly what they might be doing to your image, because I'm pretty convinced, unfortunately, in these cases that the prints would actually come out worse as a result of the editing techniques, both in terms of color and in terms of detail. So I wouldn't worry too much about absolute sharpness and a little bit of noise. You need to worry about the bigger picture first, your colors and general details, not how sharp and crisp and noise-free your image is. And I think that's a good way to conclude this video, really, which is to say that if you start to get really advanced with your processing, there's a trap there that you can fall into where you're trying to get the absolute maximum you can out of your images, but without really putting the work in to understand more fundamental aspects. And that's why I would always advocate a simple approach to processing, because Photoshop and Lightroom are very advanced tools, and using them in a simple way can produce high-grade professional results. And I see this a lot amongst photographers that I teach, often who've been on workshops with brilliant photographers in their own right, but sometimes who teach rather complex techniques. And as soon as that hand-holding goes away, unfortunately, you're applying techniques to images and not seeing the harm that can potentially be done. So Donnie, beautiful images, really loved working with them, but unfortunately I do feel like they're a bit let down by some of those detail issues. It would actually be fairly quick, I hope, to go back and undo some of those more advanced editing techniques. But thank you very much for sending them in, because it has been a useful area to discuss something a bit different from the previous critiques I've done. So thank you very much.